Admiral William Carter stood at the wide observation window of New Dawn Station, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. At 63, he had spent his entire career in what was officially called the Unified Peace Force, though most people simply called it the Fleet. The massive space structure orbited Earth at a comfortable distance, offering a breathtaking view of humanity's birthplace. 1,000 years had passed since the last war, a full millennium of peace across 37 colonized worlds. The fleet existed primarily as an exploration and rescue service now. Their ships were built for scientific discovery and emergency response, not combat. Carter's reflection stared back at him from the reinforced glass. His gray hair was cut short in the traditional style of fleet officers, more from tradition than any practical military need. The uniform he wore was designed for comfort and utility, with only small rank. Insignia on the collar indicating his position. "Admiral, we have something unusual," said a voice behind him. Carter turned to see Susan Reeves, his station's communications specialist. She was young, barely 30, with short brown hair and a serious expression that seemed out of place on her usually cheerful face. "What kind of unusual, Specialist Reeves?" Carter asked, following her to the main monitoring station. Long-range sensors picked up an anomaly near the edge of the Arcturus system, she explained, pulling up the data on the main screen. "At first, we thought it was a sensor malfunction or perhaps a natural phenomenon." Carter leaned closer, studying the readings. They showed a large mass moving at speeds that suggested artificial propulsion. "That's not a natural event," he said quietly. "No, sir." "And there's more." Susan tapped several commands, and the screen shifted to show a different view. "We've identified not one object, but many. They're in formation." Carter felt a chill run down his spine. Formation meant intelligence. Intelligence meant visitors. And visitors who hadn't announced themselves meant potential trouble. "Have they responded to standard greeting protocols?" Susan shook her head. "We've been broadcasting on all known frequencies for the past 6 hours. No response." Carter straightened up. "Alert the Planetary Council. I want a meeting within the hour." The council chamber was located at the heart of New Dawn Station. It was a circular room with a large round table, designed to eliminate any sense of hierarchy among the representatives of humanity's worlds. Today, however, only 7 council members were physically present. The others attended via holographic projection, their slightly transparent forms seated around the table. Representative Lisa Moore from Earth spoke first. "Admiral Carter, you've called this emergency session. Please explain the situation." Carter nodded to the technician, who displayed the sensor data on the main screen. "Approximately 12 hours ago, we detected multiple objects approaching from beyond the Arcturus system. They are moving in formation at speeds consistent with advanced propulsion systems. They have not responded to communication attempts." Gregory Patel, the veteran diplomat representing the Mars colonies, leaned forward. His dark eyes narrowed as he studied the formation. "That's a battle formation," he said quietly. The room fell silent. The concept was so foreign that several representatives looked confused. "A what formation?" asked the representative from Europa. "Battle. War," Patel clarified. "I've studied ancient military history. That arrangement of vessels is designed for offensive capability while maintaining defensive coverage. It's how warships used to approach a potential enemy." "That's absurd," said Representative John Wilson from Alpha Centauri. "No one has fought a war in 1,000 years. Why would anyone approach us with hostile intent?" Before Carter could respond, the chamber door slid open. A young officer hurried in, her face pale. She handed Carter a datapad without speaking. He read it quickly, his expression growing grim. "The outpost on Proxima Centauri IV has gone silent," he announced. Last transmission reported unknown vessels entering orbit. Then nothing. How many people were stationed there? Asked Lisa Moore, her voice barely above a whisper. 312, Carter replied. The silence that followed felt heavy. Oppressive. We must not jump to conclusions, said Representative Wilson. Perhaps it's a communications failure, or visitors who don't understand our protocols. 312 people, John, Lisa Moore said. We need to face facts. After 1,000 years of peace, we may be looking at an act of war. The word hung in the air, strange and almost incomprehensible to a society that had left such concepts behind generations ago. If this is true, what can we do? Asked the Europa representative. We have no weapons, no military. The fleet ships aren't designed for combat. Gregory Patel stood up. Despite being nearly 70, he carried himself with the energy of a much younger man. Humanity hasn't forgotten everything, he said. We've preserved our history, including military knowledge, even if only as historical record. He walked to the center of the room. I propose an immediate recall of all deep space vessels to defend our core systems. Meanwhile, we should access the military archives. If these visitors are indeed hostile, we need to remember skills our ancestors hoped we would never need again. Carter nodded in agreement. I also suggest we activate the emergency production protocols. Every fabrication facility in the system should be converted to produce defensive equipment. You're talking about building weapons, said Representative Wilson, sounding shocked. I'm talking about defending our people, Carter replied firmly. If I'm wrong, we can always return to peaceful operations. But if I'm right, and we do nothing. He didn't need to finish the thought. The image of the silent outpost was enough. Vote was unanimous. For the first time in a millennium, humanity would prepare for war. As the council members filed out, Carter remained behind with Gregory Patel. The old diplomat looked troubled. Do you think we remember how? Patel asked quietly. How? To fight? Carter considered the question. I don't know, but we're about to find out. In the observation deck above Earth, Officer Ben Miller watched as lights began to appear across the night side of the planet. Emergency centers activating. Production facilities coming online. A civilization remembering what it meant to defend itself. They think we've gone soft, Miller said to himself, though he wasn't sure who they were. They think 1,000 years of peace has made us weak. He placed his hand against the cool glass, looking down at the birthplace of humanity. There. Wrong. Lieutenant Catherine Wells looked out at the faces before her. 2 weeks ago, these 50 men and women had been artists, teachers, engineers, and doctors. Now they sat in what had been the Lunar Historical Museum, surrounded by ancient weapons. Behind glass cases, waiting for her to teach them how to fight. Your grandparents' grandparents never knew war, she said, her voice echoing in the large room. For 1,000 years, humanity has lived in peace. But peace doesn't mean we forgot. She activated the display behind her, showing simulations based on ancient combat footage. The recruits watched with a mixture of fascination and horror as virtual soldiers moved across battlefields that no living human had ever experienced. Today we begin remembering, Catherine continued, not because we want to, but because we must. Among the recruits, Sam Wilson raised his hand. Until 2 weeks ago, he had been a quantum physics researcher at the Lunar Science Academy. Lieutenant, the weapons shown in these simulations are primitive compared to our current technology. How do we adapt 1,000-year-old tactics to our situation? Catherine nodded. It was a good question. That's exactly what we need to figure out together. Our ancestors fought with what they had. We'll do the same with what we have. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out. Peaceful. Citizens learning to defend themselves. Scientists turning their knowledge toward protection rather than exploration. On Mars, engineer Daniel Wright stood in the massive automated factory that had once produced terraforming equipment. The factory floor stretched for nearly a kilometer, filled with fabrication units and assembly robots. For generations, these machines had built the devices that slowly made Mars more Earth-like. Now they would build something very different. "The conversion is at 80%, reported his assistant Olivia Martinez. "By tomorrow, we can begin production of defensive systems." Daniel nodded, studying the blueprints on his tablet. The designs had come from the ancient military archives, updated with current technology. "Have we received word from Earth about the shield generators?" "Yes," Olivia replied. "Dr. Kelly has adapted her energy containment fields. They should work as shields against most forms of energy weapons, at least based on our simulations." Daniel sighed. Simulations. That was all. They had. No one knew what weapons the aliens, the Korath, as they now called themselves based on intercepted communications, actually used in combat. "It will have to be enough," he said quietly. In orbit around Jupiter, General Alan Foster led the Arcturus Defense Initiative from the command center of what had once been a scientific research station. The large view screen showed the positions of all known human ships, now being retrofitted for defense. "The Korath fleet has moved past the Proxima Centauri system," reported Commander Paul Jackson. "They've established control over the colony there. Survivors report they're building some kind of structure on the surface." Alan studied the tactical display. As a student of theoretical warfare he had pursued out of historical interest rather than practical need. He recognized the classic signs of an invading force establishing a forward base. "What's the status of our defensive line?" he asked. "Neptune Station has been evacuated, with automated defense systems in place," Paul answered. "The Saturn Defense Group is at full readiness, and Jupiter's shield network is online." Alan nodded. They had turned the outer planets into a defensive perimeter, using the gas giant's natural radiation and magnetic fields to supplement their hastily created defenses. And the civilian evacuation? Nearly complete. All non-essential personnel have been moved to Earth and Mars. The inner colonies are secure. At least as secure as they could make them, Alan thought but didn't say. On Earth, in what had once been a nature preserve, outside the rebuilt city of Denver, Susan Reeves stood with Admiral Carter, watching the construction of a massive communications array. "Will it work?" Carter asked, squinting in the bright Colorado sunshine. Susan nodded, though with less confidence than she would have liked. "If the Korath use any form of quantum communications similar to ours, we should be able to intercept and decode more of their transmissions. Right now, we're only catching fragments." "And those fragments tell us what?" Carter asked. Susan hesitated. "They suggest the Korath are surprised by our resistance. They expected ... She struggled to find the right words. "They expected us to be soft," Carter finished for her. "1,000 years of peace made them think we'd forgotten how to fight." "Yes, sir. Though soft isn't quite right. The closest translation we have for the word they use is unworthy. They seem to believe that species who don't regularly engage in warfare become ... less deserving of respect." Carter's expression hardened. "They'll learn differently." 3 days later, the first true test of humanity's preparations came at Titan Station. The station orbited Saturn's largest moon, originally built to harvest methane for fuel production. Now it served as the first line of defense against the approaching Korath fleet. Captain Elizabeth Murray commanded the civilian transport ship, Northern Light, hastily retrofitted with experimental weapon systems. She and 5 similar vessels formed a defensive screen around Titan. "Korath ships entering detection range," reported her first officer, Ryan Cooper, counting 15 vessels, all larger than ours. Elizabeth felt fear twist in her stomach, but kept her expression calm. Most of her crew, had been civilian transport pilots until weeks ago. "Remember the plan," she said. "We don't need to defeat them. We just need to slow them down and collect data on their capabilities." The Korath ships approached in a precise formation, clearly the product of a society well versed in warfare. Elizabeth watched as they began to spread out, preparing to surround. "Titan Station. They're not even trying to communicate," Ryan noted. "No demands, no warnings." "They don't see us as equals," Elizabeth replied. "Begin the maneuver on my mark." She waited until the Korath fleet had committed to their approach. Vector then gave the command, "Mark." The Northern Light and its sister ships fired their engines at full power, but not away from the enemy, as the Korath might have expected from a frightened, peaceful species. Instead, they accelerated directly into the gap between the alien vessels. Using Saturn's massive gravitational field to slingshot at speeds that confused the Korath targeting systems. As they passed through the enemy formation, they deployed the first generation of humanity's new defensive weapons, not designed to destroy, but to gather information. "Sensor packages away," Ryan reported, "data flowing in." Elizabeth nodded grimly as her ship shuddered under the first hits from Korath weapons. "Now we see what we're really up against." The battle for Titan Station had begun, and with it, humanity's true awakening to warfare. The battle for Titan Station lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 3 human ships had been destroyed, but the Korath had lost 5 of their vessels. More importantly, the data gathered by Captain Elizabeth Murray's sensor packages provided humanity with its first real understanding of Korath technology. In the underground command center beneath Olympus Mons on Mars, Dr. Ryan Cooper analyzed the incoming data streams. His fingers moved quickly across the holographic display, sorting through weapon signatures, shield frequencies, and communication patterns. "They're advanced," he told Admiral Carter, who stood watching nearby, "but not as advanced as we feared. Their weapons technology is impressive, but their basic approach to physics is ... conventional." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Conventional how?" Ryan pushed his glasses up on his nose, a habit from his days as a linguistics professor before the war. "They use principles we mastered centuries ago. Powerful, yes, but nothing unexpected. No new physics." He pulled up a diagram showing the energy signature of a Korath weapon. "See this pattern? It's consistent with directed plasma technology. Very destructive, but also predictable. We can design defenses specifically targeted to these frequencies." Carter nodded slowly. "What about their communications? Have you made progress decoding their language?" "Some," Ryan replied. "It's complex, but follows logical patterns. I've managed to translate portions of their battlefield communications." He hesitated. "They seem ... confused by our resistance." "Confused?" Ryan nodded. "Based on their communications, they expected us to surrender. Immediately. There's a recurring phrase that translates roughly to 'peace we can pray.'" Carter's expression hardened. "They thought a millennium of peace made us easy targets." "Exactly. Their culture appears to value constant warfare as a means of keeping their species strong. They view our peaceful civilization as evidence of weakness." "A costly miscalculation," Carter said quietly. On the observation deck of the Jupiter defense platform, Catherine Wells watched as the newly commissioned warship Defiance emerged from the shipyards hidden within Jupiter's largest moon, Ganymede. Unlike the hastily retrofitted civilian vessels of the early conflict, Defiance represented humanity's full technological capability, turned toward war. The ship's sleek design bore little resemblance to the utilitarian vessels of the Peace Fleet. Its hull gleamed with a special coating designed to absorb and redirect energy weapons, and its propulsion system incorporated technology that had been theoretical until necessity drove innovation. "Beautiful, isn't she?" said a voice beside her. Catherine turned to see Sam Wilson, now Lieutenant Wilson, after completing the accelerated officer training program. His face showed the strain of the past month, but his eyes were clear and determined. "I never thought I'd call a warship beautiful," Catherine admitted. "Yet here we are." Sam nodded. "My grandmother used to say that humans are adaptable above all else." I never truly understood what she meant until now. Adaptable enough to win this war? Sam was quiet for a moment. The Korith have been fighting wars for their entire history. We've been at peace for 1,000 years. But in that time, we've advanced in ways they can't imagine. Below them, technicians loaded the last of the quantum displacement torpedoes onto the Defiance. The weapons had been designed by Sam himself, based on his research into quantum field manipulation. Technology that had been developed for peaceful energy production, now weaponized out of necessity. They expect us to think like them, Sam continued. To fight like them, that's their weakness. In the temporary headquarters established in the old United Nations building in New York, General Alan Foster met with the newly formed War Council. Representatives from all 37 human worlds gathered around the large circular table, some in person, others as holographic projections. The defensive line at Saturn held, Alan reported, but the Korith will adapt. Our next encounter will be harder. Lisa Moore, still serving as Earth's representative, leaned forward. What do we know about their overall numbers? How large is their fleet? Alan displayed a holographic map of known space. Based on long-range scans and the data gathered at Titan, we believe their main force includes approximately 200 warships. They also appear to have a homeworld or base of operations in this region. He indicated a star system at the edge of explored space. 200 ships against our 30, said the representative from Mars grimly. Numbers aren't everything. Alan replied, we have advantages they don't expect. For one, they don't understand our technology. Their sensors can't detect our quantum communication network, which means we can coordinate our forces without them intercepting our plans. He changed the display to show the Defiance and 5 similar vessels now under construction. Additionally, our new warships incorporate technology the Korith haven't encountered before. We've adapted our peaceful innovations for defense in ways they can't anticipate. And yet, said Gregory Patel, his voice grave, we must consider the possibility of defeat. What contingencies do we have if our outer defenses fail? Alan hesitated. Earth and the inner colonies are being fortified. If necessary, we can fall back to a defensive perimeter on Mars, but I believe we can hold them at Jupiter. As the Council continued their strategic discussion, Ben Miller walked through the ruins of Proxima Centauri 4, the once thriving colony had been the first to fall to the Korith. Now it served as a forward base for the alien forces. Though parts of it had been abandoned after the initial attack, men moved quietly, using the stealth technology built into his scout suit. As part of the newly formed intelligence division, his job was to gather information on Korith activities. The suit's sensors recorded everything he saw, feeding data back to human command through quantum channels the Korith couldn't detect. He paused as a group of Korith soldiers marched past. It was his first close look at the enemy. They were tall, with gray-green skin and forearms. Their faces were surprisingly expressive, with large eyes that scanned continuously for threats. They moved with the coordinated precision of experienced warriors. Ben waited until they passed, then continued toward the structure the Korith had built in the center of the colony. It rose like a black spire against the reddish sky of Proxima Centauri 4, surrounded by energy fields that his sensors couldn't penetrate. He needed to get closer. Information was humanity's best weapon now. As Ben carefully made his way through the ruins, a message came through his secure link. Captain Elizabeth Murray's voice, tight with urgency. All scouts return to extraction points immediately. Korath fleet is on the move. Repeat, Korath main fleet has departed Proxima Centauri. They're heading for Jupiter. The real war is about. To begin, Ben looked one last time at the black spire, then turned and ran. Humanity had learned how to fight again. Now they would need to prove they remembered how to win. The Battle of Jupiter began 3 days later. The massive gas giant's swirling storms served as a backdrop to humanity's greatest test yet. 30 human ships formed a defensive line around the planet, with the Defiance at its center. Against them came 120 Korath warships, moving in the precise formation that had become their signature. Colonel Julia Barnes stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the enemy approach on the main view screen. At 42, she had spent her career in the Peace Fleet, conducting rescue operations and scientific missions. Now she commanded humanity's most advanced warship. "All ships report ready, Colonel," said her first officer, Frank Nelson. His hands moved steadily over the tactical controls, though Julia could see the tension in his shoulders. "Remind all captains of the plan," Julia ordered. "We hold formation until they commit to their attack vector, then execute Maneuver Omega on my command." The Korath fleet continued its approach, spreading out to surround the human defenders. Their tactics were predictable, the same approach they had used at Titan and Proxima Centauri. Julia watched them carefully, waiting for the right moment. "Enemy weapons charging," Frank reported. "They're preparing to fire." Julia nodded. "Now." Across the human fleet, quantum engines engaged simultaneously. The ships didn't move forward or retreat as conventional tactics would suggest. Instead, they shifted sideways in space, using technology the Korath had never encountered. The maneuver, developed by Lieutenant Sam Wilson and named Quantum Feint, allowed the human ships to appear to be in one location, while actually being slightly offset in spacetime. The Korath weapons fired, their energy beams passing harmlessly through the space where human ships had appeared to be. "Return fire," Julia ordered. The Defiance and its sister ships launched quantum displacement torpedoes. Unlike conventional weapons that traveled through space, these weapons created a brief tunnel through spacetime, appearing directly inside Korath shields. 20 Korath ships were disabled in the first volley. On the main Korath command vessel, Supreme Commander Drac watched in confusion as his first attack failed completely. His 4 arms moved rapidly over the control panels as he tried to understand what had happened. "Impossible," he growled to his second-in-command. "Their ships moved in a way that defies physics." "Not their physics, apparently," replied his. "Second, these humans have developed technology we haven't encountered before." Drac's large eyes narrowed. "Adjust targeting parameters. They cannot maintain such a deception continuously. Their energy requirements must be enormous." The Korath fleet regrouped quickly, demonstrating the combat experience of a species that had known war for its entire history. They adjusted their formation and fired again, this time spreading their weapons fire across a wider area. Some of the shots found their targets. 3 human ships took direct hits, their shields flaring bright blue as they absorbed the energy. "Shields holding on all vessels," Frank reported. "But you're right, we can't maintain the quantum offset much longer. Power reserves dropping." Julia nodded. "Begin Phase 2. The human fleet split into 3 groups, each taking a different trajectory around Jupiter. The massive planet's gravity well, an intense magnetic field provided natural cover, interfering with Korath sensors. "They're following us, breaking into pursuit groups as expected," Frank said, watching the tactical display. Julia smiled grimly. "Spring the trap." Hidden within Jupiter's many moons, automated defense platforms activated. Developed from mining equipment once used to extract resources from the moons, these platforms now launched swarms of small, agile drones. Each drone carried a minimal weapons package but moved with incredible speed and precision. The Korath pursuit groups suddenly found themselves surrounded by thousands of targets, their sensors unable to distinguish between the drones and actual human ships in Jupiter's electromagnetic interference. In the command center on Mars, Admiral Carter and Dr. Ryan Cooper watched the battle unfold through quantum communication links. "The drone swarms are working," Ryan said, analyzing the incoming data. "The Korath are dividing their fire, trying to target everything at once." Carter nodded, but his expression remained concerned. "It won't fool them for long. Their combat experience will help them adapt." "But by then, it might be too late," Ryan replied. "Look." On the display, the human fleet had regrouped on the far side of Jupiter, now joined by 20 additional ships that had been hidden within the planet's ring system. The combined force emerged behind the scattered Korath pursuit groups. "Now, we see if Captain Murray's targeting data was accurate," Carter said quietly. Back on the Defiance, Julia gave the command to fire the main weapons array. Unlike the quantum torpedoes, which were limited in number, these weapons used focused gravity beams, technology adapted from terraforming equipment once used to reshape planetary surfaces. The beams struck the vulnerable rear sections of the Korath ships, precisely where Captain Murray's scans had detected power regulation systems. 30 Korath vessels lost power immediately, drifting helplessly in space. "Direct hits on all targeted vessels," Frank reported, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. "The Korath are falling back, regrouping around their command ship." Julia leaned forward. "The command ship. That's our real target." The Defiance broke formation, accelerating toward the massive Korath vessel at the center of their fleet. It was 3 times the size of any human ship, bristling with weapons. But Julia had studied the data from all previous encounters. She knew its weakness now. "They're targeting us with everything they have," Frank warned as the Defiance shuddered. "Under multiple impacts." "Shields at 60% and holding," reported the tactical officer. "We can make it." Julia watched as the distance closed. "Prepare the gravity lance. One shot, one opportunity." The gravity lance had been a theoretical weapon until a week ago. It created a focused point of intense gravitational force, small, but powerful enough to crush virtually any material. The weapon required so much energy that it could only be fired once before the Defiance would need to recharge its systems. In range in 15 seconds, Frank counted down. On his command ship, Supreme Commander Drac watched the lone human vessel approach. He had never encountered such tactics in centuries of warfare. The humans fought with no regard for established military doctrine, using technologies in ways no warrior race would consider. "Target that ship with all weapons," he ordered. "It must not reach us." Beams of energy lashed out from the Korath command vessel, striking the Defiance repeatedly. The human ship's shields flared and dimmed, but held. "Now," Julia ordered. The gravity lance fired, a barely visible distortion in space that connected the Defiance to the Korath command ship for a fraction of a second. Where it struck, the command ship's hull collapsed inward, armor plating crumpling like paper. The damage wasn't catastrophic, but it breached the ship's main power distribution system. Lights flickered across the massive Korath vessel. Its weapons fell silent. "Direct hit," Frank reported. "Their power grid is collapsing," Julia nodded. "Send the message." Across all frequencies, in the Korath language painstakingly decoded by Dr. Ryan Cooper, the message was broadcast. This was a demonstration. "We have shown restraint. Retreat now, or the next attack will not be so limited." For long moments, there was no response. Then, slowly, the damaged Korath command ship turned away from Jupiter. One by one, the remaining Korath vessels followed. The Battle of Jupiter was over. Humanity had won its first major victory. But Julia Barnes felt no triumph as she watched the Korath fleet retreat. Only determination. This wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. 3 months after the Battle of Jupiter, humanity prepared for what they hoped would be the final confrontation of the war. The location: a neutral star system halfway between human space and what they now knew was Korath territory. Admiral William Carter stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking out at the assembled human fleet. 60 ships now, including 15 of the advanced warships based on the Defiance design. The rest were retrofitted civilian vessels, each upgraded, with the best defensive technology humanity could produce. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Colonel Julia Barnes, now serving as his second-in-command. Carter nodded. "And our special project?" "Linda Howard reports it's ready," Julia replied, though she's still not certain it will work as intended. "It has to," Carter said quietly. "We can't afford a prolonged war." The Korath fleet appeared at the edge of the system, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 100 ships, including a new command vessel to replace the one damaged at Jupiter. Their losses had been greater than humanity's, but they still outnumbered the human forces. "They've arrived," Julia reported, holding position at the system's edge. Carter studied the tactical display. "They're being cautious. Jupiter taught them to respect our capabilities." "Should we advance?" Julia asked. Carter shook his head. "No, let them come to us. Meanwhile, begin broadcasting on all frequencies." Linda Howard, formerly a deep space communications specialist and now the head of the newly formed Contact Division, activated the system she had spent weeks perfecting. Unlike standard communication methods that targeted specific receivers, this broadcast would reach every corner of Korath territory, bypassing their military command structure. The message began transmitting, first in the Korath language, then repeated in every human language. It contained not threats or demands, but something the Korath would never expect: an offer of peace, along with detailed information about human history, culture, and technology. "They're advancing," Julia reported as the Korath fleet began moving toward the human position. "Weapons charged," Carter nodded. "Hold position. Maintain defensive posture only." The two fleets faced each other across the emptiness of space, each capable of devastating destruction. For long moments, nothing happened. Then a signal came from the Korath command ship. "A communication request." "Put it through," Carter ordered. The main screen activated, showing Supreme Commander Drac. His 4 arms were folded in what intelligence suggested was a formal posture. "Human Admiral," Drac said, his words translated by the system's Ryan Cooper, had developed. "Your broadcast reaches our homeworld and colonies. This is an unusual tactic." "Not a tactic, Commander," Carter replied. "An attempt at understanding. We've studied your people as you've studied ours. We believe this conflict is based on a fundamental misunderstanding." Drac's large eyes blinked slowly. "There is no misunderstanding. Your species has lived in peace for a millennium. In our experience, such societies become weak, unable to defend themselves. They become prey. Yet we have defended ourselves," Carter pointed out. "Not because we love war as your people do, but because we value what peace has allowed us to build." He gestured, and the screen split to show images from across human space. Great cities, scientific achievements, art, and culture that had flourished during 1,000 years without conflict. "Our peace wasn't the result of weakness, but of strength," Carter continued. "A strength to solve problems without violence. The strength to focus our energy on creation rather than destruction." Drac was silent for a moment. "Yet, when war came, you fought effectively. This contradicts our understanding." "Because peace doesn't mean forgetting how to fight," Carter explained. "It means choosing not to, until there is no other choice." On the Korath homeworld, Linda Howard's broadcast continued to play across every communication device. Young Korath, who had never questioned their society's worship of warfare, watched and listened as an alternative was presented to them for the first time. Back in the neutral system, Drac considered Carter's words. Your offer of peace instead of victory is ... unexpected. In your position, with your demonstrated capabilities, many would choose to attack. We could attack, Carter acknowledged. Our intelligence suggests we have technologies your forces haven't yet encountered. The battle would be costly for both sides. He leaned forward. But that isn't the legacy I want for humanity's return to warfare. We didn't choose this conflict, but we can choose how it ends. Julia watched the exchange with tense anticipation. Around her, the bridge crew of the Defiance waited silently. Everything depended on this moment, on whether a species that had known only war could comprehend a different path. I cannot make such a decision alone, Drac finally said. Our society has followed the path of warfare for generations. Change will not come easily. Change never does, Carter agreed. But it begins with a choice not to fire the next shot. As they spoke, a smaller Korath vessel broke formation, moving closer to the human fleet. Tactical sensors showed its weapons. We're powered down. One of our science vessels wishes to approach, Drac explained. Its commander requests direct communication with your scientists. He is ... curious about your technologies. Carter smiled slightly. Permission granted. In the months that followed, the neutral star system became the site of the space station Concordia, built jointly by human and Korath engineers. Neither a human nor a Korath design, it represented something new. Collaboration between two fundamentally different civilizations. On the observation deck of the completed station, Admiral Carter stood with Gregory Patel, watching as the first official delegation from the Korath homeworld arrived. Do you think it will last? Gregory asked. Peace with a species that has defined itself through warfare for so long? Carter considered the question. It won't be easy. There are factions among the Korath who resist any change to their traditions. But there are also those, especially among their younger generations, who see a different possibility. He turned to look at Gregory. A millennium ago, humans chose peace after centuries of warfare. The Korath face the same choice now. Because of us, Gregory said. Because we showed them another way was possible. Carter nodded. The greatest victory isn't defeating an enemy. It's turning an enemy into a friend. Below them, human and Korath representatives gathered in the main conference chamber. Scientists, diplomats, and yes, military officers from both sides working to build understanding where once there had been only conflict. After a millennium of peace, war had come back to humanity. They hadn't flinched from the challenge. They had remembered how to fight when necessary. But more importantly, they had remembered why they fought. Not for glory or conquest, but for the right to choose peace again. And perhaps to offer that choice to others.